En mörk uendelig ingmark.
Welcome to Views from the World Tree. On this week's episode, we aim for greatness. We launch ourselves down the steepest and least forgiving slopes of ice found in the world. And we celebrate world unification through strange displays of nationalism. Of course, we're talking about the Olympics. Now, on with the show.
Let the chest thumping and flag waving begin, right?
That's right, and don't forget about the doping agencies and all of that stuff.
Yes. Don't forget to stop by your state-sponsored corner store and, Anyway, jumping ahead. So for news this week, I had a list of things I could potentially talk about. I still haven't decided which of them, but I do want to report. I am happy to report that the Lego set I have been working on and live streaming on our Facebook page is finally done. It took quite a bit of doing, took longer than I expected. It was a few late nights and sore fingers, but 7,500 pieces later and 23 and some hours, it's all finished. Also, I finished editing the time-lapse video, so I'm planning on throwing that up on our YouTube channel, and the link will be in the show notes. So, other news, let's see. So this came out just today. I've been talked about World of Warcraft a little bit in the news segment for the last couple of weeks, so you'll forgive me if I go on about it a little bit more, but patch 9.2 has a release date of February 22nd. So that will go live. It's on the PTR now. It has a new zone, a lot of catch-up mechanics for alt and people coming back. Not a whole lot in this that I'm super looking forward to, other than it's always nice to get new zones, new quests, new stories, but it means that Shadowlands is the end is in sight, because this expansion has been not one of my favorites, which is too bad because I was excited for it, but it is what it is.
I hope the next one's better for you.
I think it will be. This one, so a couple of YouTubers put some videos out about kind of the internal stuff that had been going on and how it affected the storyline of this patch. It's no secret that one of my favorite characters in Warcraft is Sylvanas, and they kind of did her dirty in this patch. They were setting up this super interesting story arc, and then they decided to just turn her into kind of a really two-dimensional bad guy, twirling mustache and all. But it turns out that based on what some pretty reputable sources had to say from inside the company, that a particular individual who's kind of a sleazeball and is no longer with the company was unilaterally responsible for a lot of her character decisions, even against the advice of the story team. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I hope things get better now that there's been a shakeup with the upper management.
I think so. I mean, this particular person really had no business being there. Apparently he was heavily involved in a lot of the sexual harassment and abuse, and we'll just say that him going to rehab is not the only thing that AA has to do with him and his name. So if you know anything about the team, you know who I'm talking about now.
I think I do, but I'm not going to mention names because I don't want to slander or libel anybody. I don't know enough about it to know.
Yeah.
So
anyway, I had a couple other bullet points, but I'll leave them till next week in case I can't think of anything. So
there you go. Um, I don't know. My news. I was looking at really two stories. And one of which, did you see the BBC released recently a report from the UK's Jet Propulsion Laboratory that they have had a successful fusion reaction that lasted longer and produced more energy than their previous world record fusion reaction.
Oh, I did see that headline. Now that you mentioned that, I in the notes, yeah, fusion engine at the Jet Lab didn't trigger it, but yes, I remember seeing that. It was like 5 seconds or something.
Yeah, it was super small, but just the fact that they were able to create it, and I think the article I didn't pull it up because I wasn't smart enough to pull it up and actually study it. So, like most podcast people, I am flying by the seat of my pants. But from what I remember is it was about 5 minutes, and it gave off enough power to heat. I think they said like 60 gallons of water to boiling point
Hmm.
before it lost its power. I know it's around that, but I just think it's really cool that we're figuring out how to take hydrogen, which is one of the most common elements in our atmosphere, combine them together to create helium. Have this little
Mhm.
neutron go off and heat water. Use the steam from the heating to turn energy making stuff and release helium, which eventually breaks down and turns back into hydrogen. It's kind of a fun little little cycle that could do a lot for renewable energy.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been kind of like the holy grail of energy generation. So it's cool that they're getting a little bit closer. I think it's probably still a ways off, but I mean, any progress is good because it's definitely better than fission reactions, which have a tendency and a history of not going so well, unfortunately.
Yeah. Speaking of fission reactions, did you watch the Netflix series on Bill Gates and his outreach trying to pay people to figure out how to use these spent uranium cores because there's still so much uranium in these cores that we're just burying in the middle of the desert?
I didn't realize there was a Netflix documentary on it. I remember seeing a news article that he was trying to incentivize people. But
I don't know if after the whole thing with his wife and him kind of coming out as a sleazebag himself, if it was pulled off of Netflix, but there was a 5-part series kind of about him, and it talked about his outreach in Africa about creating working toilets, like solar toilets to fight disease in Africa, and women's rights in India, and fission reactions here in the States, and just all the little things that he's spending his billions of dollars on to try and make the world a better place. So, like, yeah, sleazeball, but he's still trying. I don't know. The world's in people live in the grace, and I don't think I'm gonna leave it there. It's in the grace. I still like what he's doing. I may not like what he is as a person, but I like what he's doing with his money.
yeah, it shows personal growth, right? I mean, yes, some of the stuff that's in the past sucks, but you know, moving forward is a good thing. I think it's a step in the right direction. So
Yeah.
let people change, let people get better.
I was going to talk about something else. I was going to talk about a book I read called The Red Deal. But since it's the Olympics episode, we have already found our first controversy of the 2022 games. I don't know if you knew this, but Russia, who is not able to march under the Russian flag because they have been found guilty of state-sponsored doping, a joke that you shared earlier on, their figure skating team, one of their members, um, supposedly failed a drug test, but because she is under the age of 16, the anti-doping laws don't quite fit for her. The Olympic Committee is being very silent because of the tension that's going on with Russia and all of that, and so some of the team figure skating medal, I think last I'd looked, has still not been awarded because there's still a criminal investigation into the doping scandal.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I was not aware that that had been a thing. I started out following stuff pretty closely, but the last couple of days I've kind of gotten busy. So crazy. It's unfortunate that we're not able to move past that kind of thing, but I guess there's a lot on the line for some of these people.
Yeah. This young woman was phenomenal. And I don't know. Is it okay to name somebody? She's all over the news, so I'm going to assume.
I think it's fine. Yeah.
This young woman, Camilla Vallieva, 15 years old, first woman to ever land a quadruple of any kind. And for those of you that aren't as polished as I am and don't understand figure skating, that's where you spin 4 times in the air before you land, and you make it look pretty. Yeah, that's actually the extent of my knowledge. I watched it a lot with my mom, but I was never a huge fan. It was actually kind of boring to me. But I did watch her performance, and she not only is the first woman to land a quad in competition, she's the first woman to land 2 quads in competition. She attempted 3, but it was able to land 2, and that's huge. I know that she's under 15 and possibly doping, probably state sponsored again, but it still is an accomplishment, and I think it was really cool. If you have a chance, go on YouTube, check it out, because it's worth it.
Yeah, and I think we should clarify that, there are things that can result in a positive test that are fairly benign. Anything from I remember reading a story about somebody who their lip balm had a steroid in it to help with inflammation, and that was enough to trigger the test. So it's pretty stringent testing, and these guys have to be really vigilant about even the tiniest thing that could set it off.
Yeah. At the same token, though, I mean, when I was in college and looking at competing in college sports, we were given a 2-page paper of anything and everything that could possibly disqualify us from competing. Yeah. So I mean, you are aware, if you pay attention in the meetings, if you read the paperwork, if you actually do your due diligence, it's very hard to mess up. And I still remember one of those meetings, and the person from NCAA flat out said, if you don't know what it is, if you have somebody that's telling you to take this and you don't know exactly what's in it, ask. Because it's not their fault for giving it to you. You're the one that gets caught.
Yeah. Yeah, it's their responsibility. And I mean, it is Russia. It's a little bit suspicious. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, those are my 2 news things. I feel like we kind of already started the subject. So let's go into the Olympics.
Yeah.
Fanfare. Yeah.
So one thing that I just wanted to throw out, because I know we do have a lot of listeners in countries that this affects, and I do know a lot of people who are boycotting these Olympics games. And we always, on our podcast, try to take a positive outlook. But that being said, we recognize that This Olympic Games in particular is pretty controversial from a couple of different angles, whether it's COVID stuff or stuff with China. We just wanted to clarify that we are not okay with some of the actions that the CCP, it's the Chinese Communist Party, has taken recently, as far as like human rights violations and alleged genocide against their own people, whether it's that, Hong Kong, uh, Taiwan, countless others. We do not condone that, but like Steve said, both of us do have experience in sports competition, formal and informal, and we understand the hard work and dedication that these athletes put in. And so we want to recognize that and support them. And so that's what this podcast is about. This podcast episode, I should say.
Yeah. Seriously. Screw Xi Jinping. I'll throw it out there. Our podcast just got banned from China, so it's okay.
All right, so Guide to the Winter Olympics. We thought it would be kind of cool to take a look at some of our favorite events and just kind of look at maybe the history behind them, or interesting facts and things. I learned a couple things in researching for this episode, and so hopefully some people out there will find these interesting as well. So do you want to start us off with curling?
Yeah, I'll go curling. So curling is an interesting sport for those of you that have not seen it. It's played on a ice court that kind of looks like a giant bocce court mixed with a shuffleboard court. And the goal is to take these giant granite stones with a handle on them. I can't remember how much they weighed, but because it comes from Scotland, I'm going to guess 16 pounds, because that's it was a common unit of measurement. One stone is 16 pounds, hence shot put and all that stuff. But this isn't a Summer Olympic thing. We'll go back into the winters. So you take this granite stone.
Jump in real quick. It must be between 38 and 44 pounds. Sorry.
Okay, so
just figured I'd look it up.
Interesting. I'm sure there's something to that. Mostly because when we throw this stuff for the heavy games, we have 56 pounds weight for distance and all of that stuff, because that was a heavy measuring weight. I can't remember what the lightweight was. 28 maybe? Wrong episode. We'll talk about that in a different one.
Yeah. My fault for derailing you. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. But the goal is to launch these stones. You've got two teams, and you take turns, and you're trying to get your stone to the closest to the center as you possibly can. And the team that gets their thing closest to the center scores the points. There's a lot of strategy to it. One of my coworkers, he retired recently, but he actually used to curl and talked about how if you sweep the outside, the stone will curl inside. If you sweep in front of it, it goes straight. If you sweep to the inside, it'll slow down the curl, or it'll curl out, depending on which way the person that sent the stone out, it spins it on release. So I thought that was kind of cool. But anyway, long rambly about what it is, what it looks like. I'm sure you've all seen it. This is cool. It started actually in the 1500s in Scotland. The same people that gave us the sport of telephone pole throwing, golf, and many other skill type of games developed this game to play on frozen rivers and lochs, and it's it's a frozen version of bocce ball, in my opinion, but it's really cool to watch. Especially this Olympiad, if you get a chance to watch one from the beginning, they have China has people dressed up in full Highland attire with the kilts, the flashes, the sporrans, playing bagpipes and drums. They have a drum and pipe group that will play traditional Scottish music before each round of curling starts as a homage to its history, which I think is kind of cool.
That is cool. I always seem to, to get like halfway in when I pull it up, but yeah, it's a fun sport to watch. I agree. And I love the sound that the granite makes sliding across the ice.
I do not like ASMR at all. It drives me up the wall, but I do agree. There is something really cool about that gentle gliding of this stone going across this ice.
Yeah. All right. So the next event on the list is the biathlon. This is the one that you see where these crazy people put on spandex suits, strap a rifle to their back, and think it's a good idea to go play on some skis. So this one, I had to do some research into this because it was fascinating to me, and the more I learned, the more fascinating. So just a quick overview of what the sport is. Like I said, there's different events within. There's different types of biathlon events, I guess, different races. There's like individual races, there's team events, there's relay races, there's different distances. And so it all comes down to, though, cross country skiing for a distance, and then you stop and you shoot at a target, shoot a rifle at a target. And in the modern games, they use a 22 caliber rifle, which is pretty small and easy to handle. And you're shooting at targets that are about the size of like a silver dollar. Or if if you were born after the 1990s and you don't know what a silver dollar is, it's about the size of a golf ball. And I want to say there's 5 targets, and based on how many you hit and how many you miss, it adds time to your score. So it's basically a race with that added skill component. So I started looking into the history of this because it's kind of different from a lot of Olympic sports. And I found that it is rooted in the skiing traditions of Scandinavia, where early inhabitants, they worshipped the Norse god Uller or Skadi, which are both seen as deities of skiing and hunting, which was interesting until I realized, well, if you live up there, being able to hunt in the winter is pretty necessary to being able to survive. So it makes sense that this would be a thing that they like practice and something that they have to do for their livelihood. Anyway, so this tradition remained active. It's kind of like a national pastime, and the first recorded of use of skiing with a rifle, so ski troops, dates back to the Norwegian Civil War, where they sent out scouts on skis. A little bit after that, some of these Norwegian military skiing regiments would organize contests between each other, and they had different events that you would do. There was like a downhill event, and a long race on flat ground carrying a rifle, which kind of evolved into what we know. And as far as how it got into the Olympics, there was initially a competition or a sport called military patrol, and people started trying to get it into the Olympics in the 1920s. It was demonstrated at the Olympic Games in 28, 36, and 48. And then in 48, it was reorganized and became accepted as an Olympic sport. The first World Championship was in 1958, and the first Olympic Games where it was a full-on competition was in 1960. And then, so that was a sport pretty much unchanged until the early 1990s. In 1992, women were first allowed to compete. And then a relatively new format called Pursuit. Again, going back to the specific rules, there's different types. The Pursuit format was added for the 2002 games in Salt Lake City. One other interesting thing that I found, up until 1965, the competition was actually done with high power rifle cartridges. So contestants were allowed to choose between a 30-06 or the 7.62 by 51 NATO, which is the 308 for us heathens here across the pond. But if you don't know anything about those calibers, those are pretty large. Like, you could easily take a deer or an elk with either of those. So I imagine that it was a much more difficult sport being able to hit those targets after, the high cardio workout of cross-country skiing. And then they moved to the 22 in 1978. So that's about it that I have to say about that.
Biathlon and Nordic combined, which is ski jumping on one day and then the biathlon on the other, are my favorite events of the Olympics, just because there is this skill of being able to control your breathing and your heart rate after sprinting 2.5 kilometers to your next set of targets. And like you said, from the prone, like a $50 size target, to standing, I think it's a little bit bigger, but it's not much bigger.
Yeah.
Takes some real skill. Yeah. Fun to watch. And with such a deep history in Scandinavia, you can kind of tell why Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Russia tend to do really well at this sport.
Yeah, they're the powerhouses.
Yep. The next sport on the list is related because it's also skiing, but this is the Alpine Skiing. As Adam had said, skis have been around in the far north countries for a long time. I found a link that said that the skiing itself has been traced to prehistoric times in Russia, Finland, Sweden, Norway, where people would put wood planks on their feet to make it so they wouldn't fall through the ice when they had to cross rivers and whatnot. And that's kind of where skiing came from. The word ski itself is actually a Norse word, ski, which means split wood or split firewood. So, short history of the skiing. 1760, skiing was officially integrated into military training, as said before. In 1850s, the downhill skiing supposedly started near what its modern form is. The idea was to see how fast you could make it down a hill while skiing around trees to find the best person in each military division. This is from Wikipedia. I couldn't verify it, but somebody said that they did without a little link, so I'm going to put that out there. It's a possibility. Seems plausible to me. The first downhill competition ever recorded was held in Oslo, Norway in 1861. The word slalom, which is one of the more popular ones to watch, where the folks going down the hill have to go in and out of flags, comes from the Norwegian word slå, which means slope, and lam, or trail, so literally trail on a slope. Also from this period of figuring out alpine skiing, ski jumping came on, where people would throw themselves down a hill as fast as they could and see how far they could fly through the air. Really exciting, really dangerous. One of my all-time favorite movies, Eddie the Eagle. covers this. It is awesome to watch. In kind of like auto racing, I feel like most people watch it just because there's the chance. I don't know what else to say, you know?
Yeah, I always loved watching the alpine skiing when they show the slow mo, and you can just see these people's skis like flopping and warping, and you realize
Mm-hmm.
the kind of stress that they're under, because I think they get up to like 70, 80 miles an hour pretty frequently.
Oh,
So
it's crazy. Your waxman and your ski engineers have to be really good at their game to make sure that you don't have equipment malfunction when you're going down those hills.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure skiing in one form or another has been around since the very first Olympic Games, since like 1900s, early 1900s. I forgot to add that to the notes, so I'm going to say that's true. Don't look it up in case I'm wrong.
Yeah, it makes sense. So moving on then, uh, any discussion of the Winter Olympics between people who grew up in the 90s would be amiss if we didn't mention the bobsled. Also, in this category, we're lumping in the skeleton and the luge for obvious reasons. So bobsled, um, you know, a bunch of people pile into a giant metal tube and go flying down an ice track and hope they survive. Similar, so skeleton and luge, sorry, are similar, except you're not enclosed. It's just literally on a sled, like the old timey sleds. Luge, I think they have a 2-man luge, right?
Yeah.
So, and you steer a little bit with your feet. Bobsled, you have a little bit more steering controls. So the first bobsleds were built in the 19th century in Switzerland. Um, by tourists from Britain who were staying at the Palace Hotel. The early sleds were adapted from sleds and toboggans that were used by delivery boys. They eventually evolved into bobsleighs, luges, and skeletons. Initially, tourists would race their hand built contraptions down the narrow streets. However, as collisions increased and carnage grew, local residents uh, eventually were able to get it banned from public highways. And then in 1884, a purpose built run was constructed near the hamlet of Cresta. And the Cresta bobsled run remains the oldest in the world and is currently the home of the St. Moritz Tobogganing Club. It has actually hosted 2 Olympic Winter Games as of 2014 and is still in use. And as I alluded to, a little known film in the 90s you may have heard of called Cool Runnings. Tells the story of a unlikely group of sprinters from Jamaica who decided to try their hand at becoming bobsled competitors. And in this 2022 Winter Olympics, we actually have a Jamaican bobsled team. So all of the millennials are loving that.
I as a millennial, I'm excited not just that we have a Jamaican bobsled team, because there's been one, I feel like, every year in the 2-man category. We have the 4-man category, the 2-man category, the monobob, so the 1-man category, and a women's team from Jamaica. This is like the year of Jamaica, and it makes me want to watch Cool Runnings every night.
Yeah. Such a good movie.
Yeah, if you have not seen it and have access to Disney Plus or access to any type of streaming service, definitely give that one a watch. It is one of those feel-good sports movies that just makes you want to celebrate sport for the sake of sport. And with the history of bobsled, let's be honest, there's a reason why the Swiss are very protective of their sport and did not want to give it to these people who come from an island country that has never seen snow.
True.
The next one on our list is skating of one kind or another. As we talked about a little bit in the news, figure skating is a big money draw for the Olympics. Traditionally, the champions of the skating, figure skating for each of their nations, the ones that join the Olympics and participate, get to go and do these exhibitions, which gains money. Back in the day, it used to be tied to different conventions, different festivals and stuff to bring people in. So it's always been a showman sport. But ice skating is another prehistoric contraption. This is something that I didn't know. I thought that it was a pretty recent development. This idea of putting blades onto your boots to like cross ice, but I guess they have found archaeological records of like primitive ice skates from about 3000 BCE.
Wow, that's
which
old.
is crazy to me. And I forgot to write down which country they developed in. I think it was a Russian invention. It might have been a Finnish invention. But it's up there on that little peninsula that's like on the Russian-Finland border where they found the prehistoric evidence. Edges to these blades were added by the Dutch in the 13th and 14th century. And the international figure skating competitions began to appear around the 1890s in Europe, with the first actual competition world championship held in 1896 in Hamburg, Germany. And they were at the 1908 Summer Olympics in London, and then added to the Winter Olympics when Winter Olympics became a thing. So it was an exhibition. But something that I found interesting, depending on where you were at, there were different social classes tied to ice skating. In Holland, there wasn't a status symbol. Everybody just did it. So the Dutch, it was a way to get across all the canals during the winter so that you can get from point A to point B, which is probably why the Netherlands is one of the strongest speed skating nations. They have this ingrained in their heritage of skating long distances very fast during the winter. Sorry, it sounded like you were going to say.
I just was going to say, and they're definitely great at it. That's the few speed skating events that I have caught this year. There's been some Dutch competitors and going around and around like orange bolts of light, I guess.
I do feel like the Netherlands they're just fun to watch. I don't believe in that like any nationality has natural ability over anybody else, but there is something in the Dutch genetics that just makes them awesome at figure skating or at speed skating.
Yeah. And I think the one that I was watching, they set an Olympic record and then broke his own one, set a second Olympic record. So, anyway, didn't mean to jump in. Sorry.
Oh no, that's fine. I like the discussion. We're both nerding out over the Olympics. We might as well discuss.
Yeah.
So since we're kind of on the speed skating thing, I'll go down that route a little bit. There's two different disciplines of speed skating. The long track, which is, I want to say, about the size of a running track inside. It's got strict laws on outside lane, inside lane with a passing thing. There's techniques of drafting, and that's really cool because it's so fluid. It's almost artistic. the way these people are able to glide and push off the ice. It's really exciting to watch. And then there's short track, which is speed skating about inside the equivalent of an ice hockey rink. And you get 4 to 8 people. Some events like Team Pursuit, you have 4 people per team, all out there at the same time, drafting off of each other and skating as fast as they can a certain amount of distance. And it is like a combination of track cycling, like actually going into the peloton and like going around the track cycle, and a demolition derby. It's exciting, it's crazy, and the foot long blades on the bottom of these guys' boots, it just looks dangerous, but it is super exciting, super fun to see. I love watching it.
Yeah, the short track is the one with all the people you were talking about is fun to watch because it's kind of like roller derby but more dangerous.
Yeah.
I was watching, though, it was just you have the two countries with one athlete each and just racing each other around. They only get like 2 to 3 strides on the straightaway before they have to like slow down and start their turn. And I just like, it's got to be so difficult to basically sprint for like 2 steps and then slow down, do your turn, sprint for 2 steps, slow down, do your turn. Because I looked it up and the short track is 111 meters long, which is crazy short. Having done track in high school, 100 meters was the shortest distance that our school competed in. And so to think that and that was a straight race, sprinting race.
Mm-hmm.
So to think that they took that and curved it into a circle, gave these people knives to strap on their feet and said, all right, go wild. It's kind of crazy to me, but
yeah, it's super cramped. It's fun to watch. I really enjoy watching it.
Yeah, it is fun.
Long track's a little bit different. That's how long is that track?
It's longer. I think, like you said, it's comparable to a track and field
I want to
track,
say
which is 400 meters.
I want to say one lap is about 500 meters, maybe a little less. So I think it is comparable.
Says 400 meters, so it's
Okay.
It's exactly the same then at least as a collegiate track and field track.
Well, either way, they're both fun to watch. As far as figure skating, again, I'm a professional. I've watched it a couple times. I know that there's different disciplines in it. There's the men's and women's free skate, where they're just competing against each other, and to me that looks like a more athletic form of acrobatic, like ballet type of thing, where there's a lot of jumps, leaps, and things with compulsory moves that you have to do that you're graded on, as well as like artistic expression. And then there's a pairs event, which is similar with all the jumps and leaps and stuff, except you can throw your partner. I've never seen a girl throw a guy, but I don't think there's anything in the rules that says it can't happen. So maybe one of these days we'll see it. But that also has compulsories with different scores. And then there's ice dancing, I think is what the last one's called. And that is like ballroom dancing on ice skates with lifts and holds, but you're not allowed to throw. And I think those are the 4 disciplines of figure skating. And it's still probably one of the most watched disciplines in all of the Olympics. A lot of people from all over the world watch it. So,
oh yeah, it's really popular. It's one of the few Olympic sports that my wife likes to watch. So
There
it
you go.
was, and I'm like you. Like it is interesting to watch, but I mean, after a while, it all seems very, very much the same. And so she got mad at me the other day when I tried to switch to something else. But anyway, when I
I
think of the,
mean, oh, sorry, go.
I was just going to say, when I think of figure skating, I think of there was an old movie. I can't remember the name of it, but there's a hockey player who, and I don't remember why. This was, it's like as old as me, and I saw it one time just flipping through the channels. I think I might have been like homesick from school, but this hockey player has to become a figure skater. I don't remember if he gets kicked out of hockey or something. And so he's trying to learn to figure skate with this girl who's his partner, and he keeps hitting the toe pick on his skates and like face planting on the ice. And that was
Yeah.
like my earliest introduction to figure skating. So I can't watch a competition now without thinking of that movie. But
The movie was called The Cutting Edge.
there you go.
I've watched it many times. In high school, one of my friends used to date a figure skater, so it was like we'd watch it a couple times a year just because it was like their favorite movies. And from what I remember, he had either a traumatic brain injury or something that made it so he couldn't play professional hockey anymore.
Okay.
But he still wanted to skate, and like somebody answered a call for a super pompous, stuck up figure skaters like partner audition thing, and the coach went, or the coach reached out to him or something. I don't remember how they met, but it really was a fun, goofy, quasi horribly acted movie.
Well, it was from that era, so
Yeah.
it fits. Anyway, derailed us a little bit there.
Derailed, but still on
Yeah, maybe rentals and stuff on iTunes of whatever you call it, the something edge will go up now.
there you go.
So, so speaking of hockey player turned figure skater, should we move on to hockey?
I think we should. And that actually is the last winter sport. I don't think there's any left.
Okay. Well, hockey it is then. So, hockey is believed to have roots in Middle Ages era stick and ball games played in England that matured into field hockey. That is in the Summer Olympics. So, field hockey then turned into a game called brandy that used sticks to move a ball across a frozen pond into a goal that the other team's trying to protect. So it was literally field hockey on ice. And then in 1875, the first indoor ice hockey game was played in Montreal, Canada, because of course it was, because Canada.
Right.
Instead of a ball, they used a flattened wooden puck to keep it from becoming airborne and killing people in the stands. So it followed the Hockey Association rules, which was the governing body of field hockey until around 1880 when it split and became more of its own thing. In 1888, Lord Stanley of Preston, the Governor General of Canada, came to a Montreal Winter Festival and was impressed with the sport. He realized that there was no trophy awarded to the best team in Canada and decided to fix that. So he purchased a silver cup that he would then give to the best team in the country. This was in 1892, which slowly spread around the world. America embraced the sport first, having played a similar game called ice polo, and eventually made its way into the Olympics. And if you are familiar with hockey in the NHL, you will understand the significance of the first silver cup being awarded to the champion. It obviously became the inspiration for the Stanley Cup, which is awarded today.
I had a lot of fun researching this one because hockey is one of my all-time favorite games. It's a great spectator sport. It's awesome. But I never realized why it was called Lord Stanley's Cup until I researched it and went, oh, that's why it's Lord Stanley's Cup.
It's kind of fun to research new things and see the inspiration for things. The world makes a lot more sense when you know where things come from.
Right.
It's fun.
And in my headcanon of where hockey came from, I always assumed it was a Scandinavian, like a Norwegian, Swedish sport, just because their international teams are always pretty good at it. I didn't realize it was basically made in its final rendition in Canada. And I thought that was kind of cool too.
Yeah. Where I grew up, hockey was not really a big thing, but we did play a lot of street hockey. So just on like asphalt we had a puck that had little ball bearings and like captive in the puck. So it would kind of slide across the asphalt. That was a lot of fun. Never really did do ice hockey though.
I could never afford it. Always wanted to. But ice time was so expensive when I was growing up because there wasn't a lot of places, so the demand was high. Plus, growing up in a semi-arid area, keeping ice from melting during the summer costs a lot of money.
Yeah, and I'm sure all of the equipment is not cheap either. You got skates and stick and pads and all kinds of crazy stuff. So, I have been ice skating before, and I have. So the first few times I went ice skating, I tried figure skates, and then one time in college, I went on a date to. It was actually one of the Olympic rinks. From up in Salt Lake, and tried hockey skates for the first time. And if you are looking to try ice skating, use hockey skates. They're so much easier, so much more comfortable. But anyway, just a little anecdote, I guess.
No, that's actually a really good point. Most guys that I know walk, run, do everything with their shoulders forward, so they move their center of gravity forward. And on figure skates, there's a little thing called a toe pick. And if you're moving your center of gravity forward and not skating with perfect upright posture, you are going to hit that and you are going to eat ice every time that you lean forward and try to like chase momentum. So if you are used to walking with your body weight forward, hockey skates are 100 times easier.
Oh, yes.
If you have proper posture, I would argue that figure skates might be a little bit easier because the toe pick does offer another option of stopping you instead of slamming into the boards.
Yeah. For me, it was always about the ankle support. I really struggled to keep my feet upright on figure skates. They would always want to like underpronate, so they would always want to tip inwards, but didn't have that issue on hockey skates.
Yeah, it's probably all that extra padding so that people don't break your ankles with a puck.
Pucks or sticks or sliding into you, fist fights.
I don't know how fist fights will break your ankles, but
probably not. Actually, that brings up a good question. Maybe you know the answer to. Is fighting allowed in the Olympic version of ice hockey?
I don't know. Let me look it up.
I know in the NHL it's allowed to a certain degree, and that degree sometimes seems to be as long as nobody's bleeding, but
there's rules about it. Both players have to drop their gloves and agree to the fight. In the NHL, otherwise it's a roughing or unsportsmanlike. Um, in the European Professional Hockey League and the Olympic League, fighting is not allowed. It results in suspensions, not 5-minute major or 5-minute minors.
I guess that makes sense. It's too bad. That's some of the most entertaining things to watch about hockey.
Yeah, I don't know that a sport that's supposed to unify the world and stop people from fighting wars would really like embrace the American and Canadian need to express their dominance by punching each other in the face. Uh, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and it's one thing when you've got, a couple Americans beating each other up, or a couple Canadians, or an American and a Canadian. But yeah, I could see like you get like an American team and a Russian team, and you start a fist fight on the ice. That could have some international repercussions.
Oh yeah, can you imagine the 1980 game that was already
Oh,
super violent if fights were allowed?
there would have been deaths. I guarantee it.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like the best idea to me, but I don't know.
Especially in a sport where you have blades strapped to your feet.
Right. Right.
Anyway, I think that's all of the major events. I'm sure we're missing some. There's so many of them. But I think
Yeah, I couldn't
they
think
all
of
kind
any
of
others.
I think they all kind of fall into the categories that we had. So I think we can move on from there.
Yep. And which kind of brings us to memories. I had a whole idea of what we could do, so I think we're just going to go into our favorite memories, coolest uniforms, cool stories that we had. Of it.
Okay. I'll let you start it off.
We kind of touched on it. My favorite, I think the coolest story that I have is Cool Runnings, the first Jamaican bobsled team. Have to say, that's my favorite mostly because I always like the underdogs. It doesn't matter what sport, I will root for the underdogs. To an extent, unless I'm a fan of somebody that like is not an underdog, but you know. And just this idea of these three sprinters that find an American coach, and he takes these three sprinters and another gentleman to the Olympics in Vancouver. And not only do they qualify despite the sports governing body being against them, they kind of shine, they qualify, they make it through the first two runs and qualify for the final two runs, where I don't want to ruin the movie, but where they do not make it any farther, but they kind of get better as they're going, and it's really a fun story.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I was right at that age growing up that watching that movie was probably cemented as my favorite Winter Olympic moment. Just like you said, the story is inspiring to watch even 20 something years later. And it's not a lot of movies hold up after that amount of time, but that one honestly does. So I'll go with the Jamaican bobsled team as well. It's a bit of a cop out, but how could you go with anything else if you grew up during that time?
Right. Trying to think. Some of the others, I loved the Salt Lake games. I loved the scenery because I was familiar with the area. I thought those were cool. Sasha Cohen, I remember her being one of the first American women to just dominate and win gold against a very stacked Russian and Chinese side. And that was a fun story. The speed skater, Apollo Ono, I remember him. This young man just dominated. Like people were cutting their hair like Apollo Ono at some point, like with the frosted highlights and all. Just there was so many cool little stories from the thing that I really enjoyed.
I think he popularized or repopularized the soul patch.
Yeah, he definitely rocked that. Maybe a little bit longer than he should have, but you know. Yeah. Trying to think. And then Eddie the Eagle. I don't know. Have you ever seen that movie?
I have not, actually.
I can't remember the comedian's name, but it's this. It's a story about this young man that he dreamed of being an Olympian, and tried everything. He tried swimming. He tried running. He was never fast enough. He was never good enough. Never strong enough. He found skiing. He wasn't good enough doing the downhill Alpine skiing. Moves to a chalet in Switzerland or Germany, and watching people ski jump, he tries to teach himself how to ski jump, and finally a coach takes pity on him, teaches him how to do that. He gets enough points to qualify and becomes the United Kingdom's first ever ski jumper. Great story. Another underdog to greatness type of thing. And I actually think his story is lesser known just because he qualified at the same time that the Jamaican bobsled team qualified. So it was the same Olympiad that had that. And I think that kind of overshadowed him.
Yeah, it's definitely less well known because I don't remember hearing about that. I'll have to check that one out, though.
I think I'm going to look it up. I know we watched it for free. Where can we stream it? Of course, it's not going to tell me. Golly. It says that you can watch it on Disney Plus.
Oh, nice.
So
that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I don't think it was a Disney movie. It might have been a Fox property that Disney got rights to when they bought Fox.
There is very little now that Disney does not have their hands in.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think we've kind of covered the Olympics.
Yeah. You had on here, the only other thing you had on here that I feel like I could offer an opinion on is coolest uniforms.
Okay.
So if we're expanding it to other Olympic Games, there are two uniforms that kind of like stand out in my mind as this is what the Winter Olympics are. And the first one is the hockey uniforms from the 1980 Miracle on Ice games, which is the dark blue jersey with the red USA like across the chest. And I mean, I was not alive for that, but I remember seeing footage of it, and then it just had that like classic collegiate font. And when they did one of the Mighty Ducks movies, they in one of the sequels, where they're in the Olympics. It was very similar to that. And then the other Winter Olympic uniforms that I just absolutely loved. It was, I don't remember which year it was. It was about 10 years ago. It was the Norwegian curling team. And so I'm going to say it was like 2010 or 2012 maybe. But they had these red, white, and blue Argyle pants that were just wild and just so much fun to watch. I just loved it.
I remember those. Those were fun. Yeah, both of those are good choices. I'm trying to think. I want to say the 98 Olympics. The U.S. ski team had their uniform sponsor, the people that made their ski suits, was Spider. And they had like a red, white, and blue spider web all over that just looked awesome.
I think I remember seeing those.
And then as far as this Olympiad, I have to say the Danish curling team has a really cool uniform. It's made by Uniqlo, and it just looks comfortable. It looks like something that I would wear hiking. It just looks awesome. Lightweight, athletic, yet still kind of dressy, something that you could get away with wearing to work.
Yeah.
So
I like it.
Those are my two favorite. Apparently the flashy and the not flashy.
There you go.
So alrighty. Well, I guess we need to figure out what we're going to do next week, but we can do that after mindfulness moment.
Okay. So for the mindfulness moment, I had kind of been slacking the last few weeks. And so this week I was trying to think about what to share. Hadn't really read anything. My reading is kind of pivoted a little bit to some novels, nothing terribly inspirational. But I did have, so there's a quote that, and I looked, I searched. I could not find the original person who said this quote, so I apologize. And it's been requoted by somewhat famous people so many times that it's kind of attributed to everybody at this point. So the quote is, "Be kind because you never know what someone else is going through." And this was kind of in my mind because I have a bit of an online shopping addiction, which has been kind of enabled and fueled by the last couple of years of this pandemic. But I recently started setting out a box of treats for the Amazon drivers and whoever else delivers packages to my house. And so it just has like some bottled water. I usually put like a couple oranges and some bananas, some Nutri-Grain bars. And I also have a video doorbell. And so I was looking today at the driver that came from Amazon, and my house, you walk up the driveway and then you come around to the front door, and like he came around the corner and he saw the box and he was just like, yes! He was like so excited. And it was so cool to see. And he like walked up and he put the package down and scanned it and everything. And he like looked through and he grabbed a drink, and he like started to walk down the sidewalk, and he like turned back and was talking to the camera, because so my doorbell camera like has a little pulsing light that comes on when it's recording. So he knew that he was on camera. And he like stopped and he kind of looked back over his shoulder and he turned back around and he was like, I just really wanted to say thank you.
Thank you so much.
Like,
if you see this,
it means so much, like so much more than you would know. And
it means a lot.
From like the way he was said it, and you could just tell that he had a very long day. And just that little act of kindness went so, like, it made such a difference in his day. And he was so genuinely happy. And like, it takes me 2 seconds to throw some stuff in a box and write a little note on it. But it just made his day, and it just made me feel like, I was able to put some happiness in someone's day, and that really made me feel good. So that was my moment of mindfulness for this week.
I love it. I don't do that enough. I really should. We always forget what other people are going through, and I think it's important to just give ourselves a chance to look outside of ourselves, and what you're doing probably really makes their day. I mean, clearly it does, because he went out of his way to go back to your doorbell cam and say thank you. So really good thought.
Yeah.
Thank you again for joining us this week as we looked at the Olympic Games, at least the winter ones. As winter comes to an end, though, we would like to take a moment to walk everybody through how to start a seed indoors to prepare for the planting season. So join us next week as we look at Gardening 101, how to start. See you then.
Sen oktoberafton under en himmel